Hey everybody, welcome back to Cruiseman's Garage Talk. This show is an opportunity. I get to talk to some of the most interesting people in the sport of motorcycling. And today I'm very excited to welcome one of my personal friends who's also a local motorcycle rider here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we'll welcome Dale Jones.
Welcome to another episode of Garage Talk, the podcast for motorcycle enthusiasts with your host, Cruiseman. Today's episode is sponsored by Cruiseman's Garage Honda Goldwing Maintenance Videos, a collection of more than 80 videos that show you how to maintain your own Honda Goldwing. Today's episode starts now.
Dale, how you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me, Chris.
You bet. And one of the reasons I invited Dale, let me just give a little history, and you can add to this if you want to. I can remember we met, what was it, maybe 2 or 3 years ago?
5 probably.
Oh, was it that
It's
long?
probably
Oh,
been that
God, time's flying. I was, back in that period of time, I was going to Einstein's Bagels almost every morning. And I think Dale was in there one day and came up and introduced himself. I guess he recognized me.
I did.
Is that how you remember it?
It's a little more in depth than that.
Okay.
I had been at home doing some rehabilitating from an illness. And while I was doing that, I was watching videos about anything about Goldwing motorcycles, because I had just purchased one. And I saw your videos and I kept watching them with interest. And, eventually I noticed that man lives in my area. I will eventually meet him and run into him. So sure enough, one day I was headed to on a ride, actually, and I saw your motorcycle and Don's motorcycle parked in front of the Einstein. I thought, I'm going to go in and say hello. And so, yes, I came in and introduced myself. Your videos was a big part of my rehab. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad it brought you a little relief or entertainment, because I know you were laid up for some time, and that's a tough situation. Tell us a little bit go back in history and tell us how you got started riding motorcycles. And then I'm going to talk about your more recent history.
My earliest memory of motorcycling is very vivid today. My father and brother and myself were in the car, and we were driving down the street, and we passed a business that had rental go-karts. And so my dad offered, hey, do you want to ride some go-karts? And of course we said yes. And we pulled in, and the name of this company was Shake, Rattle, and Roll. And they also had mini bikes for rent. And so, of course, I asked my father, can I ride the mini bikes? And he allowed me to do that. And I think I was 8 years old. And
wow.
It's been ever since I've wanted to ride two wheels.
Can you imagine a business today letting 8-year-olds rent a motorcycle and ride it? Wow. But kids were tougher back then. They didn't,
we had to be.
They weren't as protected. You had to be, yes. But I know that you and I have one thing in common. You also had a Trail 70. Tell me that story.
I did. One year on my birthday, I stayed home from school on my dad's command, and we got in the car and drove across town to a private residence here in Dallas. And we walked up to the door, and the man opened the door, and he took us around back to his garage. He opened the garage door, and there sat in his garage, red or blue, either one. His whole garage was full of brand new Trail 70s. He was a pilot for a local airlines here in Dallas, and his route was flying him to and from Japan. and he was bringing those back on his aircraft that he was piloting and selling them out of his garage. So I
So bootlegged.
bootleg. I got a red one, of course.
Wow. Did it say Dax or
It
did it
did say
actually say
Dax.
Trail 70?
It did say Dax.
Did it really?
Yes. I would love to have that today.
Yeah. Well, I know. But how many times have we, wish we could have kept our first car or our first motorcycle or something like that? But you delivered papers on that bike, is that right?
I did. I had a Dallas Morning newspaper route, and so about 4:30 or 5 a.m. every day, I initially was doing it on a bicycle, but when I got the Trail 70, I started delivering the newspapers on the Trail 70 and did that all summer until my customers started complaining about the trail that I left in their lawns. In those days, we had to put the newspaper on the porch. So
Right.
I drove up close to the front of their home and tossed it on their porch.
That didn't last long.
No, it didn't last long.
So what was your next bike? I think you had another, and you have an interesting story about I think you did a wheelie on it or something. What was that?
After high school, as soon as I turned 18 and left high school, I left home to be on my own. And so I bought a Honda CB 550 used to ride back and forth to work, try to save money. But as an 18-year-old, I did a rather dumb thing and tried to do a wheelie on that CB 550. And it had so little power that I actually was trying to help it by pulling up on the grips. And one hand came off, I don't remember which, but the handlebars crossed up. And of course, when it came down, I took a tumble, breaking my collarbone.
Oh.
And I learned a good lesson from that.
Did you have on a helmet?
I did have it was required in Texas then.
Okay.
Yep. So yes, I had a
You're
helmet.
pretty lucky. You're pretty lucky. It's a miracle, the stuff we did when we were young.
Like you said,
How we
we had to be
survived.
tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I can remember I had my Trail 70 in the driveway and I was cleaning the chain. I think I've told the story before. And like an idiot, I had the bike up on a block and I had the engine running, had it in first or second gear. And, I was spraying the chain cleaner on there. And like an idiot, I took the rag and I pressed down on that bottom chain and it just took my finger right up into the sprocket.
Oh, wow. You can lose a finger that way.
No, I was lucky. I lost the fingernail. I had to go to the emergency room and they had to remove my fingernail, and it got like 6 or 7 shots underneath the fingernail. That was not fun. But you talk about tough. I went into the kid. I think my mom was playing cards with some of her friends, and she didn't even get up from the table. She had me go to my next door neighbor and have him drive me to the emergency room. Yeah,
Rub some dirt on it.
wasn't like nowadays. And then let's see. Later on, you had a pretty interesting career in paint and body, and tell us a little bit about your history with that, because you were just kind of finishing that up, I think, when we met.
Right. I loved cars and motorcycles and anything with engines. And I had an uncle that had his own garage, and I loved visiting there and tinkering in his garage with him. It was mechanical. But I went to the Ford assembly plant that was located in Dallas on a school field trip, of all things. And I watched them painting those cars back in those days by hand. And
Oh, really?
I watched them painting those cars, and I just couldn't imagine how much fun that would be to paint a car. So I did. I took a vocational class in high school that was auto painting body. And so as soon as I left high school, I started a job at a Ford dealership working on cars, painting cars. I
Wow.
painted cars about 30 years before I realized my body wasn't going to let me do that any longer, particularly my eyesight. And so I got into management. So I spent the better part of 45 years in the automotive collision business. I decided to
And I
quit.
think when we met,
That was
you were either, were you still at Lexus when we met?
Yes, I was still at the dealership body shop there, and it was a very nice dealership. They treated me so well. It was a local dealership that sold Lexus and Porsche, Mercedes, Bentleys and Rolls, McLarens, all the nicer cars. It was a lot of fun to work there. I spent almost 20 years at that dealership before retiring. As a result of my illness, I decided I've had enough of that. I'm going to try something else for a few years. So I quit. I quit the dealership after being sick. So
What's the most expensive paint job you've ever done or had your dealership ever did on a car? What kind of car was it, and what would tell us about the paint?
we did a $150,000 repair to a Porsche Turbo
Wow.
that required all the metal from the windshield forward to be replaced, all the structure and everything. And it was all glued together. It had just a couple of small 2-inch long wells on the body, but the rest of it was all glued and riveted. Amazing.
Wow.
We also repaired a Rolls Royce that had a crushed diamond in the clear coat. 1 gallon of clear coat was $10,000.
Wow. And how long ago was that?
It wasn't that long ago, maybe 10 years ago.
Well, that could be double in price by now.
Sure,
Though.
sure.
Wow. Those are fascinating stories. So, how did you get interested in the Honda Goldwing? Because I think you also had a Moto Guzzi when we met.
I did. I had a friend, David, that he and I were touring around all over in the country. He and I went to Alaska together back in the 80s. But early 80s, he and I were going to Daytona for the races every year during Bike Week. And one year we were at Daytona, and it was just raining buckets. It was terrible. We knew there was going to be no races at the Speedway that day, so we just hung around the hotel room and played poker for tanks of gas. I bought the gas all the way home. But there were two men in the room next to us, and they were in their 70s, and they were still riding motorcycles. And I remember telling my friend David, I hope I can ride when I'm their age. And a few years ago, I remembered that story, thinking those men were riding Gold Wings, and here I am getting a little older. Perhaps I should give one of those a try. People give, all kind of misnomers to a Gold Wing, like couch on wheels and things as that. But after riding one, and my first one was a 2018 six-speed, and I just fell in love with the bike. It was like a large sport touring bike. I've always been a little bit leaned towards sport bikes or sport touring bikes, but I really loved the Gold Wing. It was quite easy to ride, actually. People sometimes think because it's so heavy that they would be hard to ride, but they're so well balanced and the center of gravity is so low that they're really quite easy to ride. I love the bike. It was.
And then you moved moved to an Africa Twin for a while. You sold your Goldwing or traded it.
I did.
Got an Africa Twin because you were going to go to Alaska, I believe.
Again, yes. We were planning. My friends and I were planning another trip to Alaska, and so I wanted to buy a motorcycle suitable for that. So I bought a 23 Africa Twin Adventure Sport with the DCT. It was a pre-owned bike, but it just had a few miles. And I really wasn't interested in the DCT,
Right.
but the price of the motorcycle was hard to beat. So I went ahead and bought it and fell in love with the DCT once I had it. So after going to Alaska and putting about 30,000 miles on that Africa Twin, I sold it and got a DCT going 2024. And it's a very nice bike. The
Yeah, it's
DCTs,
beautiful. I had one the same color. I loved
you
it.
did.
And yeah, you've got the airbag model, which I kind of regret not getting. And you have a lot of thoughts about those airbags. And share your philosophy and your thoughts on the airbag model Goldwing.
It goes back further than the Go Wings. Because I was in the collision auto business, I saw the progression of airbags in cars and how they were saving people's lives. And people were walking away from collisions that previously would have been injurious, if not fatal. When I bought this Go Wing, I bought a 24 because the 25s were already out, and I bought the 24 because I like the navigation. I know most people don't, but I do. And the Honda dealer where I purchased the bike new had the airbag, and it was a leftover model year, so it was slightly discounted. So I purchased that because I always like a good deal. And I bought the airbag, and I never regretted spending the extra money for the airbag for a moment. So I knew that I felt that I knew the importance of the airbag. And of course, I even took it a step further, and I now wear an airbag as well. And you can spend a lot of money on products that sometimes will give you buyer's remorse. And never have I felt that once about purchasing a motorcycle with an airbag or purchasing an airbag vest. I think it's money well
Well,
spent.
you actually convinced me to start wearing the airbag vest, and I've been wearing it regularly. And yeah, I mean, in the summertime it can get a little hotter, but you don't do it for comfort anyway. You do it for safety. I mean, it's a lot more comfortable than having asphalt scrubbed out of your skin or having a broken rib.
Yeah, the broken rib, I think, is what really got my attention. Was that airbag vest covers your ribs in front and back. And at my age, I'm almost 70, so a broken rib could really be debilitating, perhaps even leading to pneumonia or something like that. So I
Right.
feel like it's a really good idea to wear it if you want to. I mean, it's personal choice, just like a helmet. But as for me, I'm going to wear the gear.
I agree. I mean, I never get on the bike without a helmet, gloves, boots, a jacket. I've said it in the past. I'm sometimes forgetful and don't wear my riding pants, but I do now wear the vest, and along with the jacket with the padding in it or the armor in it. And this kind of leads us into the real meat of our discussion, and that's your career or in retirement, semi-retirement as an MSF instructor, because I don't think I've ever had anybody on the show that was an MSF instructor. So tell us how that all started.
1986, I saw an advertisement that was offering a course for instructors for the Motorcycle Safety Foundation. I didn't really want to teach the course at that time. I wanted to see what else there was to learn about motorcycling. So I took the course, and I can't remember how long the course was. It wasn't very long. I think it was just a few days actually to take the instructor's course. I took the course with, I think all the people in the class, save me and one other student, were police officers. And we took the course, and I couldn't continue to teach the course at that time because of my job. In those days, it was at least a 3-day course to teach the course, and they paid $75. So that's $25 a day. So it was really a hobby more than anything. And most people that were doing it then were either the police officers that were required to take it, or military people that had their motorcycle on the base. They were required to take it. I just couldn't continue to teach the course and pay for my home and family and all that at $25 a day. So I taught one course, and then I didn't teach it again. I didn't take any more classes. But then a few years ago, when retirement, the thought of retirement came into the picture, like many people that are afraid to retire because they think they might be bored, I decided to take that course again. I went to Midland, Texas, in the middle of summer for a 9-day course to become an instructor. The instructor was a captain in the Texas Department of Public Safety. He made things very stressful. There were 10 of us in the class, and only 5 of us that finished.
Wow.
I don't think it's that hard. It just takes the willingness to stick it out. And of course, you got to have some skills in order to be able to teach it. But you basically go through the curriculum over and over and over and over and learn the curriculum. Anybody could teach this that knows how to ride a motorcycle and that can talk to people and recognize their habits or what they're doing. It's a lot of fun teaching the course. I get to meet a lot of people, most of them young people. Get a lot of immigrants now that are coming into the course that have to take it. You must take the course now to get your driver's license in Texas. I assume that it's that way in most states. But the satisfaction that you get from teaching, it was very similar to what I was getting from painting cars. At the end of a repair, you could stand back and look at your repair and say, man, that looks good. And now I finish a class and I can see people that don't know the difference between the clutch lever and the brake lever at day 1. And then at the end of 2 days, they're able to ride a motorcycle with some proficiency and with some confidence. And that's very satisfying to be able to help them in that way. You can see the results of your work.
Sure. I wonder how many people ride motorcycles that don't have a license.
I don't know that number. I do know that 60% of fatalities on motorcycles are people that do not have license.
Really?
I don't think that the MSF course is the end all to be all, but it's got to help if you take anything from the statistics or that statistic.
Man,
it's got to mean something.
That's amazing, because there's quite a few people killed on motorcycles every year, and that 60%, that's a lot of people.
It is.
And I know you're really big on practice and practicing braking and turning skills, and hopefully you and I can get together someday and maybe make a video of some of your practice routines and drills that you do. And I think you even sent me a little video of some of the, like in parking lots, what you do for your turns and things.
I do try to practice my own skills As a matter of fact, I will spend 3 to 5 minutes doing a few U-turns to the left and a few U-turns to the right and a couple of quick stops before I go for a ride. It gets me in the right frame of mind. It prepares me for what may come out there on the roads. The U-turns are really helpful to cause a motorcyclist to turn their head each way to look. And of course, the quick stops, you never know when you're going to have to do a quick stop in an intersection or what have you to avoid a
Right.
collision. It's best to remember how that feels so that you can do it with precision and control
And not panic.
and not do a panic brake. Yes.
What do you think is the biggest mistake that you see when you ride with other people that, maybe you don't tell them about it, but in your mind you say, wow, I wish I wouldn't do that, or something that you find that people kind of do inherently that if they would not do that would be much safer?
There are a lot of things. I went for a group ride just a week ago, and I watched the leader in the group making abrupt lane changes. And there was 4 of us in the group, and the next 2 motorcycles followed him and did the same abrupt lane changes. And like I tell my students, a lane change should be smooth and predictable so that if you make a mistake and not see a car, they can avoid you. And he wasn't doing that. I knew that was wrong. But I think what bothers me most is just the posture that people have on motorcycles. Some people like to leave their fingers covering the brake lever so they're quick to use it. And I understand that. And nearly all of my Asian students do that. They keep their fingers on the brake lever. In countries like India and Vietnam, where there's so many motorcycles, it's kind of important to be able to be quick to the brake because they're riding so close to one another. But here in the United States, and particularly in Texas, we have roads that have 85-mile-an-hour speed limits. It's important to have your fingers around that grip for good handlebar and throttle control. If your fingers are on that lever, try to bring my hand up here. If your fingers are up around that grip, it's easy to roll on and roll off of that throttle. But when your fingers are up here on the lever, it locks that ability to roll off the throttle. And and the first thing that we do when we stop is to roll off the throttle. If you're trying to stop and you're not able to roll off the throttle, then you're defeating the purpose of the brakes by adding throttle at the same time. It's good. It's good to have posture on a motorcycle. That is, your hands are around the grips. Your fingers are around the grips with a flat wrist to keep from whiskey throttle. Your feet are on the footrest, and I know this is going to hurt a lot of feelings, but your feet are on the footrest and not out on highway pegs. I think I sent you a picture. I don't know if you'll post it or use it or not. In 24, when I went to Alaska, one of the men was on a Triumph Tiger 1200, and he hit a bump in the road that was so severe it bent both of his wheels. If your hands aren't on the grips and your feet aren't on the footrest, he probably would have fallen off that motorcycle. It was such a significant bump.
Good point.
So that's the reason for
I've been guilty of using highway pegs. So I don't use them much, but I have.
Yeah.
Now, you also I don't know how long ago, I don't think it was a year, but you had an incident with a deer strike. Tell us what that experience was like.
Do I have to?
No.
No, I'll tell you. It's actually a good story. We were in Virginia and we were riding down a very narrow road. It didn't even have a center stripe. and the timber came to within just a foot or two of the roadway on either side.
Hmm.
And I was riding along at about 45 miles an hour. That doesn't seem fast. A deer came out of the woods and struck me at about my mirror on my left side. She hit me hard enough that it pushed me over in the lane. I didn't fall, but it did significant damage to the motorcycle, breaking the fairing and the windscreen, the headlamp, even it moved the whole fairing over, bending the structure that holds the fairing on. It also
Wow.
broke that switch panel that's in the center of the motorcycle in front of you there with all the buttons. I was lucky. I mean, I never saw her until she hit me. And I realized in hindsight, my mistake was my speed. That road should have been traveled slower than 45. A big part of our learning on a motorcycle is to remember the things that have happened and to discuss those things that happened. Be brief, if you will. At the end of a ride, you may ask yourself what you liked about that ride. It might have been that you were traveling on a mountain road and you really enjoyed that. So what that would teach you is in the future, you will look for mountain roads to ride.
Yeah.
In this case, I stopped after the incident, and my friend Kurt from Denver, he and I discussed it a little bit, and I realized I was going too fast and how lucky I was not to have crashed. I'll credit the Gold Wing size for that a little bit. But I learned from that. And next time I'm on a road that's narrow and the timber comes right up next to the road, I won't go 45. Go a little
Right.
slower.
Yeah. Wow. I've been fortunate. I don't even think I've ever hit anything critter wise. I've been very fortunate. I almost hit a wild turkey one time, flew right in front of the bike. I was going about 45 on the Blue Ridge Parkway. And this huge wild turkey just flew right in front of me. Missed the windshield by about, I'd say, a foot. And that would have been a bad day.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know what a wild turkey weighs, but a butterball's
They're big.
12 pounds.
Oh,
So,
I bet it. No, I think it's bigger than that.
yeah, that wouldn't be
But
good.
anyway, well, do you have any parting thoughts of that you want to leave people with as far as MSF courses or safety, or what do you recommend people do? I mean, if they haven't been to a course.
You know, if you haven't been to a course, there is a 1-day basic course. It is the basic course, but it's just 1 day. So that's for people that we don't need to teach them how to use a clutch and brake and throttle and shift and all those. But we put them through some fairly tough things to do, and you can use your own motorcycle in that course if you like, but it requires U-turns and quick stops and swerves and things like that. If you've never done one of those courses, it might be good to know that you're able to do those things properly so that when you need them, you can use them. I've heard it. I don't know the statistic exactly, but oftentimes we fail to do anything when something happens in front of us other than use the brakes. Now, you know, your brakes are an important part of our ability to avoid a collision, probably the most widely used. But if you don't have time to stop, you need to be able to swerve. Can you swerve? Have you ever done it? You should practice. And if you haven't done it in a course, then it'd probably be good to learn it in a course. You can use their motorcycles if you'd like, but it's worth the time. Every time I have.
How do you feel about doing low speed drills with a DCT?
I do put it in manual mode for that because the motorcycle can shift in the middle of a U-turn or something, which might upset some people. I kind of expect it when I do it, but and of course with the DCT, you don't have a clutch to control your speed when you're going super slow. If you're going super slow on a manual transmission, you can use the clutch to control your speed. But with the DCT, you can't. So you need to learn to use the rear brake to modulate that. And your foot is not as coordinated as your hand. So it takes practice.
Right. But it can be done.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. I've seen some people do some pretty good slow speed maneuvers on DCTs. So
you don't have to start with a 20-foot U-turn. A parking space is 9 feet. Try some U-turns and try to do it within 3 parking spaces. And once you've mastered that, then try it in 2.5 parking spaces, and so on.
Right.
So
I'm just really appreciate it. A lot of wisdom, and I hope this encourages people to take that one day. I call it a refresher course, but
it's called a BR. It's called a BRC2.
BRC2.
Yes.
And how many places around the country offer this?
I don't know that, but it can be found online. Just look up MSF, a course near you, and it will show you.
Okay.
The outfit I work with has 3 in Dallas.
Well, Dale, thanks so much for joining me and for sharing all this great information. I think it's a great story, and I do appreciate it. And I'm sure I'll see you at coffee soon.
Thanks for having me. And as you always say, ride often and ride safe. Is that correct?
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate that. Saved me from having to say it.
That's the best practice. Just ride often. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Dale. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Garage Talk is available on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, and of course, YouTube. You can help support the podcast by making sure you've subscribed to my YouTube channel. Just click that little subscribe button down below. Don't forget to click the notification bell. And if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you hit that like button and give it a thumbs up. That really does help the channel.